my grandparents were alive during the war, so I decided to interview them for my World War II project. Hope you enjoyed the video. Grandpa, can you tell me one memory about the war?
Yes, I was 11 when war broke out in 1939, and the following year, 1940, I went for a holiday with one of my aunties who lived in Liverpool, which at that time hadn't been bombed. But when we were there, the air raid siren went, and we all went into the air raid shelter. They had an air raid shelter in their back garden called an Anderson shelter. And we were sitting in the shelter, and we then heard the bombs dropping, not where we were, fortunately, but a few miles away in the centre of Liverpool where the docks were. And we could see fires, the sky was lit up with fires. The bombing went on for quite a while, and then it stopped, and we then went back into the house, and that was the end of it.
I also understand that you were in London during parts of the war.
Yes, I went to stay with another auntie in London. This was towards the end of the war, when it was after the Blitz. The Blitz, I think, was earlier in the war, when London was bombed terribly. Lots and lots of people were killed, and thousands of houses were destroyed. And one day we went into London, and on the way back we went into an underground station, or tube station as they were called, and still are called. And when we went down the escalator to where the trains were coming in, the platform was filled with bunks, double bunk beds, where people were sheltering from the bombs. They'd left their homes, when it got dark, and they took the bedding and went and slept there all night. And when we were waiting for the train, I could see people sleeping on their beds in the underground. And that was the only safe way to look after yourself during the war, because the bombing was so terrible.
I understand that your father, my great-grandfather, fought in the war.
Yes, that's right. When war broke out in 1939, he was 36. So he wasn't called up for military service straight away because of his age. They took younger people first. And in 1941, when he was 38, he was called up into the Royal Artillery, or gunners as they used to be called. And a few months after, when he finished his initial training, he got embarkation leave, and then went on a ship, which first of all went to South Africa, and then went on and landed in Singapore. And he was at Singapore just before the Japanese captured the island, and he was taken a prisoner. And he was a prisoner of war under the Japanese for 3.5 years. And he spent a lot of that time working as a prisoner on building a new railway which went from Burma to Siam, as it was then called. It's now called Thailand. But although the conditions were so dreadful there that lots of the prisoners died, but he fortunately survived, and he came home in 1945. And I remember going with my sisters and my mother to meet him at the station in Evacuation, and we came home, and people in the town where we lived waved as we went by.
Grandma, can you tell me what you remember about rationing during the war?
Yes. Food was in very short supply, and it soon became obvious that there wasn't enough food in the country to go round, and that rich people were able to buy a lot more than poor people. So that's one reason why there was rationing. The other was that the food couldn't be delivered because it came from abroad. Anyway, the shops were rationed and each person was allowed so many ounces of categories of things, like I think it was 2 ounces of butter a week per person. So a family of 4 would have had 8 ounces, half a pound of butter a week to last for the whole family. And it was hard because you had to use that butter for absolutely everything, cooking, spreading on bread, doing whatever you like. So people couldn't make cakes very often. They used to have to save up their ration. Everything was rationed, all fats, butter, cheese, anything with fat in it was rationed. Sugar was rationed. Flour wasn't. There was plenty of flour. What would it have been beside fat and sugar?
Were eggs rationed?
No, they weren't rationed, but a lot of things were in short supply.
Did you swap with other people? Say you wanted some sugar and they wanted some flour and you could swap. Well, not flour.
Not flour because it wasn't rationed, but yes, people used to do a lot of swapping. People who didn't like sugar would swap their sugar for half a pound of butter or whatever it was. In fact, some people were quite poor and they would swap their butter because butter was expensive, and a lot of funny dealing went on there. My mother used to swap her she used to get fat, and she would give her sugar to next door neighbour or someone who lived down the road. A lot of that went on, but rationing was a legal thing controlled by the government, and each page of a ration book was divided into say 8 sections, which meant 8 stamps. So no one could cheat the shops, because if your stamp wasn't on it, or was on it, you'd had that thing and you weren't allowed to have any more.
What about gas masks? Did you use gas masks?
We were supplied with them very quickly at the beginning of the war. We were supplied with gas masks, and it was compulsory, I was about your age, to take your gas mask to school, and everybody used to compete for the prettiest and best gas mask cover, because it was a thing about that size, and it went in a box, and they put the box in a cover and you could wear it on your shoulder. I tried mine on once and I thought I was going to die with suffocation. Put it back in the box, and that was the last I saw of it. I just carried it on my shoulder to school every day and back. Never bothered about it. But we were living in a very secluded part of Wales, and we weren't really conscious of the war, of that side of the war, whereas boys of your age who lived in London wouldn't have dared go out without their gas masks.
What about blackouts?
Blackouts were a term used for, well, what it says, blackout. You weren't allowed to have any lights in your house which showed through the windows. And people, like special policemen, used to go around and, air raid wardens I think they were called. They used to go around examining people's windows to see if there was a chink of light, and if there was so much as a narrow strip of light, they'd be knocking on your door to tell you to cover it up and do something. So a lot of shops made a lot of money over selling blackout curtains. A lot of black material was on sale, so everybody would put on a curtain rail their blackout before they put the curtains on. They were very strict about that. And the blackout itself, you said, what about the blackout? Oh, what about it? It was terrible. It was a blackout. I wasn't allowed out because it was dangerous. You couldn't see where you were going or anything. You couldn't take a flashlight because that would interfere with the blackout. It was a tough time, that was.
Grandad,
Yeah.
what was it like in Sussex during the war?
Well, it was very busy with army trucks, a few tanks, and planes going over. Sometimes you could see them in the distance fighting, but not really close, just here. One or two crashed, and as lads we would try and get to the crash and have a look. We used to take any ammunition if it was there, because inside the bullet case was cordite in strips, and you could take the bullet out and take the cordite out and put a match and see it going on. So that was one thing we used to do. So I never got close to any fighting really. There were no bombs dropped in our area. I went to Croydon for a while, and we used to go into the underground shelter, and one night a bomb dropped on the opposite house in the garden, and a boy I knew was in the shelter, and it blew the shelter up, landed right on it. So that wasn't very nice.
Nanny,
Yeah.
you lived in Sussex too. Do you remember any bombs dropping?
Yeah. I remember the bombs dropping, and I remember the doodle bugs coming over. Because we had bombs dropped near our house, and it upset the house pretty much. And the doodle bugs landed just above that, and that caused trouble too. So, if I'd been in my bed, I would have been killed probably. But there we are. We had to live through that sort of thing.
What was it like being evacuated, and where were you evacuated to?
Well, I wasn't very old, and I think it's a little bit frightening at the time. But I was sent to a very nice family in Gloucestershire. They had a family as well, and it was very good. I went to school there. I joined in everything there, went to the guides, and yeah, it was very good. But then I had problems, so I came back home again.
Did you miss your family?
I did. My brothers had to go into the forces. Uncle Les was in the Navy, Uncle Reg was in the Army, and Uncle Pat went in the Air Force, and Uncle Don went in the Army. But they were later ones. Les was the one in the worst part of the war. He came home very shell-shocked. Yes. But we all got through it. Thank goodness. Otherwise I would never have met your granddad.